So you're thinking about taking the AWS Certified Solution Architect Associate exam, but the biggest question you have before you start is, how difficult is it? Before we get into the exam itself, it's important to know where the Solution Architect Associate exam lands across the overall hierarchy of AWS certifications. AWS certifications are based on foundational, it's the associate, it's the professional, and it's the specialization. Now, the Solution Architect Associate is one notch above foundational, so I would consider it an immediate level certification. If you have zero AWS experience, it might be a little bit of a steep climb for you to jump directly into it. Now, I'm not saying that you can't do that. I'm just saying set expectations appropriately. Typically, if you don't have that AWS fundamental knowledge, I would direct you to take a look at AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner. Now, if you have decided you want to take that Solution Architect Associate, this is where I recommend beginning. 3 different areas. The first is you want to navigate to the AWS certification landing page. Every AWS certification has a landing page, which is just essentially a website that tells you the high-level data that you need to know about the certification. Now, I have it pulled up here right now on my iPad, so I'll just go over a few key things you want to know. The associate level exam for Solution Architect is 130 minutes. Now, there's going to be 65 questions on the exam. There's going to be a mix of multiple choice, which is where you select a single multiple choice answer. And then there's going to be what's called multiple select. This is where you'll select multiple answers that best fit what the question is asking for. Now, according to AWS, in terms of who should take the exam, preferably you have some experience in AWS technology already. You may have some on-premises IT experience and an understanding of how that maps to the cloud, and you have a little bit of experience in cloud services. Now, if you're watching this video right now and you're saying to yourself, wait a minute, I don't have any of that, is this not for me? This is absolutely for you. You can do this with zero experience, but just might take you a little longer to study, or you might have to put a little more focus on hands-on labs. Now, in terms of what you'll learn, this certification focuses on computing, networking, storage, and database AWS services at the fundamental level. You will need to have some knowledge of AWS Management Console and command line interface, and definitely you need to understand the well-architected framework. In fact, a lot of the exam is aligned very closely to the AWS well-architected framework, which you'll find out more about as I tell you about another resource here shortly. And don't worry, I'm going to put links down in the description to all the resources that I'm talking about so you can review them offline. Now, the second resource I want to mention to you is the AWS Solution Architect Associate Exam Guide. Imagine if you were going to take a trip, right, to somewhere you've never been. Would you leave without a map? Chances are you wouldn't. You should always download the exam guide at the very beginning for any AWS certification. I'm going to quickly go over some key points for the Solution Architect Associate Exam Guide here to kind of help you figure out what this thing's about. So this exam is going to validate a candidate's ability to complete the following task. You're going to have to design solutions that incorporate AWS services to meet current business requirements and future projected needs. You're going to need to design architectures that are secure, resilient, high-performing, and cost-optimized. These are actually the domains that the exam guide talks about more. In every exam guide, there's something called domains, which is like the overarching subject matter, and then there's tasks, which are individual bullet points. And you'll see this in the exam guide that I'll link to below, which is what could possibly show up on the exam in terms of those topics. And then the last item here is you need to be able to review existing solutions and determine improvements. Now, I mentioned earlier there's 65 questions. The interesting thing here is the exam guide points out that there are 15 unscored questions that do not affect your score out of those 65. The thing is, you're not going to know which of those 15 questions are unscored, so you're going to need to make an attempt to answer everything. Now, the score range for this thing could land between 100 and 1,000. If you get 1,000 on it, you've done darn good. If you get 100 on it, well, that's not so great. And the minimum passing score is 720. Now, the Solution Architect Associate exam has 4 domains on it, which is what you're going to need to study and focus on to be able to prepare for this exam properly. Domain 1 is Design Secure Architectures. Now, this is worth 30% of the scored content, nearly 1/3 of the entire exam. Designing secure architectures is not something you want to gloss over. So you want to make sure you have a very firm understanding of this. Domain 2 is Design Resilient Architectures. This involves basically building an architecture that is scalable and fault tolerant, talking about multiple availability zones, auto scaling, and these types of concepts to make sure your architecture is resilient. Then we have high performing architectures. Oh, and going back to resilient architectures, that's worth 26%. Now, the domain 3, designing high performance architectures, is worth 24%. And as the name suggests, you need to be able to figure out how can you efficiently scale performance to meet the requirements that are outlined in the questions as they pop up on the exam. And the last and final domain is domain 4, design cost optimized architectures. That is worth 20% of the exam. Now, one question you might have for cost optimization is, what is cost optimization doing on an architecture exam? Well, you'll learn soon enough that the architecture and cost is integral to the overall solution architecture exam. Because in the cloud, you can build multiple architectures that deliver the outcomes for the business, and each one of those architectures can have a different cost. Your goal from a cost optimization perspective is to build the architecture that delivers the business outcomes with the most cost efficiency possible. And the final resource I want to talk about is practice questions. I would not recommend going and sitting for an AWS certified exam without doing some practice questions first. I'm going to put a link in the description below to get you access to some practice questions to kind of see how you stack up. Now, you're more than welcome to try these now to see how difficult the questions are. And then the idea would be, as you prepare for the exam, go back and take a look at those practice questions to see how you do. And hopefully, as you study, you just get better at those practice questions. If you've made it this far in the video, please go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already, and make sure you give the video a thumbs up and share the content as well, because this helps the channel grow and makes sure the content reaches those folks that are trying to learn AWS. If you'd like to see a future video of me going through a Solution Architect Associate question and actually breaking it down step by step, I'm happy to do that video as well. Just let me know down in the comments. I'll see you in the next video.